record. Okay, I think it's recording. Did it ask for your permission for it?
It did, yes.
Okay. All right, Simone. Well, thank you so much for joining me. For everybody who's watching, this is Miss Patton. Miss Patton teaches 4th and 5th grade at Fay Elementary in City Heights. I was lucky enough to be able to teach with Miss Patton during my student teaching, so that's how we know each other. And she was kind enough to join us today for our interview. So thank you, Miss Patton, for being here.
Of course.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get right into these questions. I know we talked a little bit about learning situation earlier. I think they're just mainly talking about like learning environment when they talk about learning situation.
Okay.
Is what I inferred. So the first question is, what would be the optimum learning situation for learning? You can take that in any direction you want.
Oh, awesome. Okay. For me, as a teacher, I like to create a space where my students feel like they can just kind of explore. So I guess maybe project-based learning would be the optimum learning situation for me. I like giving them questions. So like an essential question, something that they can research and really dig into. For any subject really, but yeah, I think project-based learning is big, and the inquiry and just getting them curious and involved is a big thing, especially with the younger kids engaged in the learning.
Yep, sparking that curiosity, that's the key, because once you get them on the hook, they're gonna stay there and they're gonna want to keep going for the bait.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that first answer. The next question is, what would you, the teacher, be doing in that situation?
During project-based learning, I believe the teacher, as me, I would just be facilitating really and kind of just guiding the students, but it's not going to be really like that lecture-based learning where I'm up there just talking all the time. So it's just watching over them and kind of just guiding them through the direction that I want them to go in, but also giving them that freedom. So just the teacher is usually the facilitator. So.
Gotcha. So you're creating an environment where you want your students to be more active in the learning process, and it's not a passive situation where you're just depositing information and they're just intaking it.
Right. Yeah.
You want them to be going on their own journey of exploration.
Yes. Yeah. And exploration is it's for the elementary kids, I think that's such an important way to get them, like you said earlier, hook them into learning and just get them to buy in. So,
Yep.
Like recently we had a project. We had a project where the students were doing kind of their own exploration in space, so like a exoplanet kind of thing. And I gave them all the vocabulary. I gave them like the front loading. So
Okay.
I made sure they had all the vocabulary they needed, the background information. They did research, and then when it came to the project portion, it was all them. I let them choose their own groups. That way it wasn't, oh, but you put me with this person and it's not working out. I was like, oh no, you chose your group. So,
yeah.
I just mainly kind of guided them through like, oh, remember when we learned about this? Remember when you read about that? And what do you need here? What equations? Remember when we covered this in math? How do you think this applies here? So
Right.
I kind of just like would be the person that kept them on track and just kind of reminded them of what they already knew and what we learned in their notes and things like that, but they were actively involved.
Excellent. All right, Simone, moving on to our third question here. What would students be doing in that situation? And I know you kind of, you've kind of elaborated on that. So if there's anything more you want to add to that, feel free. But I think you kind of covered it.
Yeah. Just I feel like it's kind of like the flipped classroom also in a way where they're taking more agency that visual learning. They're the ones that are involved at where they should be.
Hmm.
They have an idea where they need to go. So all of that, like keeping the data folders and stuff and making them more conscientious of their learning. So
Hmm.
in this environment, they're the ones that are in a way driving their own car. So
I,
where they need to go.
I like that. They're the ones driving their own car. All right. Okay, fourth question here. What kind of learning materials would students be using in this project-based ideal learning situation?
Oh, wow.
And it's going to vary. Obviously, it's going to vary for each lesson and unit.
Right. Um, well, I guess that has to do with like what the classroom looks like, what's made available. But whatever's whatever's needed. I don't know how to approach this question, being that it's elementary.
Right.
But I do flexible seating. So as far as that goes, students have materials that make them comfortable and also make our classroom still a safe learning environment. So students work in groups. They have the traditional things that you use in school. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No. Yeah.
Notebooks.
Whatever you can think of.
Right.
I know for me it's with PE, I'm sort of limited to this stuff. Like I'm able to incorporate like the natural resources of the outdoor environment into my classroom, which is
Right.
great. Do you ever do any outdoor type lessons where you bring the kids outside for any kind
I
of
have
science
not
or
this year. So
okay.
not yet. I'm gonna say yet.
Okay.
Last year I did do quite a bit with the kids, where we would go outside for a little bit. But yeah, this year it's been a lot of indoor things. Trying to think, but just a certain situation, what would I be? So for the science, just for so that I can answer the question.
Sure.
So for the science materials that they needed, uh, any art supplies. So I'm a big art person. So I wanted
Yep.
them to really think outside the box and be able to just use their imagination. So I provided them with things that I would have wanted to use if I were doing the project. So they had clay available to them. They had the like glitter pens pretty much, so they can make their I wish I could give you some pictures, but their planets turned out awesome. They had like what is that called, just any art supply you can think of, the pipe cleaners. Of course they had their notebooks. I would make sure that they know how to research, so that's a big thing. So they needed technology, access to Google, right? So I would give them a list of websites that they could use. I gave them a lot of different websites for like NASA, the what is that? That's by us. Science Museum, the Fleet. So I used a lot of materials from them. Being able to use their science books and how to go about researching with a book. That's a big thing. Because they know how to Google now, right? They had a whole year of that, but going back to books, I'm having access to the book, the library. That's a big one. So especially for research and for project-based learning, because research is such a big chunk of it. So having access to those materials, research materials, is key.
Definitely. All right. Last question already, if you can believe it here, Miss Patton. What would your assessments look like in that ideal learning situation?
So of course you would have your formative assessments. So I would have like the check-ins, the exit tickets, the anecdotal recording and notes. That's very key to the learning process and seeing where the students are at. And then the summative assessment would be the project. So the students could receive a rubric or a checklist of what I expect from them and what their expectations are for their own learning, right? So I try to tell my students it's not about just answering questions on a test and getting it right, but it's checking where you're at in your own learning and what you need to learn and what you already know. So I'm looking at it from that aspect. The project, they have a checklist and they know this is what I'm looking for and what they should know. And then it's up to them to navigate. So they get this rubric at the very beginning. It's a part of a packet that I
Okay.
give them. So they know that this is the test. And then I give them up to a month, really. It took us for the couple of projects we've done. And after I tell them, well, this is the same rubric that I'm using for your grade. So we go through the rubric together and see what they did and we talk about it. So we have like a conferring kind of thing. And that's also part of the formative assessment too. We confer along the way. So they'll anytime they can walk up to me and what do you think? Should I add this? And they can bounce ideas off of me. And that's all a part of the formative assessment too. But the project itself, that's what I love about it. It is the assessment. So the final project. Yeah.
Gotcha. I mean, got to have your formative assessment connect with your summative. So it sounds like the kids are on their way with that they can come in and talk to you at any point and get feedback about how the project is going. So that way, when it's finally turned in, everything should be all buttoned up and ready to go.
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, I think that is it for our questions, Simone. I'm not sure if there's any lasting message you want to leave us with. Now's your opportunity. If you want to, there's something you didn't get to share that you really want to make sure we know. Other than that, that's all I got.
Okay, well, I am definitely a person that's for PBL, so project-based learning or problem-based learning. I feel like it connects to the real world. So on the job, you're always having to think outside of the box, really think about how is this going to get me from point A to point B. It's not all about just assessments and test taking all the time. It's practical, it's hands-on. So yeah. That's
Practicality. I think that's my biggest takeaway from the interview is you're making sure that what you're teaching them, your students will be able to use in the real world and in their everyday lives, and they're able to connect the two.
Yes. Yeah.
All righty. Well, thanks so much, Miss Patton. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.